Up next in the broadcast, new elementary textbooks in Japan rewrite history to claim Korea's Dokdo Island, which prompts Seoul to lodge formal disapproval. The discovery of North Korean drones in South Korean territory prompts the Defense Ministry to boost air defense and starts a heated debate in Parliament. And in a move to sustain the rapid growth of Korea's cultural content, the government unveils almost 50 measures to support the multi-billion-dollar industry. Primetime News begins now.
Good evening to our viewers in Korea, and hello to those of you who are watching from around the world. It's Friday, April 4th here in Seoul. I'm Yoo Ji-hye.
And I'm Sean Lim. Thank you so much for joining us. We begin with confirmation of a widely expected move by Japan that throws more cold water on the struggling Korea-Japan relationship. It approved numerous textbooks that claim Korea's Dokdo Island, and its new diplomatic blue paper shows no movement on the wartime sexual slavery issue.
Our foreign affairs correspondent Hwang Sung-hee reports on how these measures may have erased some of the gains from last month's summit talks with Tokyo and Washington.
8 out of 12 textbooks that will be used in Japanese elementary schools starting next spring will falsely state that Korea's Dokdo Island is part of Japan. Of the 8 textbooks approved by the Japanese Education Ministry Friday, 6 say Korea is illegally occupying Dokdo, known as Takeshima in Japanese, while 2 carry maps that mark the island as Japanese territory. Dokdo, which is physically closer to Korea in the body of water that divides the Korean peninsula and Japan, has long been a thorn in bilateral relations. In protest of the textbooks, which make much stronger claims over Dokdo than before, Seoul's foreign ministry summoned the Japanese ambassador to South Korea and warned of further strained ties.
The South Korean government warns that if the Japanese government continues to make unjustified claims on Dokdo through its textbook revisions, it will only further distance the two countries.
On the same day, Japan released its annual diplomatic blue paper, which carries Tokyo's stance on the victims of its wartime sexual enslavement of women. In it, Tokyo says all wartime compensation issues between Japan and South Korea were settled under a 1965 bilateral treaty that normalized diplomatic ties between the two countries. It claims that even though the so-called comfort women were compensated by a government-linked Asian Women's Fund and received apologies from previous prime ministers, Korea continues to demand additional measures from Japan. It says Japan believes the issue should not be turned into a diplomatic feud and that it's putting every effort into resolving the issue. Around 200,000 women, mostly Korean, were forced to serve the Japanese military during the Second World War, and many are still waiting for a heartfelt apology from Japan. While Seoul and Tokyo were expected to hold working-level talks on the so-called comfort women issue this month, the chances of such a meeting taking place at this time appear slim. Hwang Sung-hee, Arirang News.
The foreign experts' take on Japan's increasingly right-wing attitude in trying to justify the country's past misdeeds against Koreans and its effect on the already soured Seoul-Tokyo relations. We bring in Dr. Bong Youngshik, Senior Research Fellow at the Asan Institute for Policy Studies. Thank you very much for joining us.
Pleased to be here.
Well, it seemed that Seoul-Tokyo ties took a step in the right direction last month when President Park and Prime Minister Abe sat down for the first time with President Barack Obama in a summit. But how damaging do you think the latest move is by Tokyo?
The latest move by Tokyo is detrimental to the improvement of the bilateral partnership between the two countries. But I wouldn't say that that move would push the entire thing to square one. Because the momentum for improvement of the bilateral partnership has been already created after the first summit meeting between President Park Geun-hye and Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. And Japan's moves were largely anticipated by the South Korean government.
But today's action by Japan certainly brings into question Prime Minister Abe's sincerity in trying to resolve the ongoing historical dispute with Korea, and of course his true intentions. What do you think he's after?
Well, his sincerity or credibility with regard to apology for Japan's colonial past, well, it wouldn't help, right? But at the same time, the majority opinion of the international community is that it is basically up to Japanese people to decide on how to apologize or how to atone for the past.
U.S. President Barack Obama is set to swing by Korea and Japan later this month. How will he navigate the Seoul-Tokyo tensions?
Very carefully. And I don't think it is the intention of the Obama administration to do anything too big or too serious about the historical dispute between Japan and South Korea. There are two reasons for that. One is that the Obama administration's hands are full. It has to deal with the North Korea's provocations, which just declare that it is ready to take another nuclear test in a manner that is beyond America's imagination. And with regard to Japan, negotiating the Trans-Pacific Partnership is going to be very tough for Obama administration, because Abe administration is very well aware of what is called the Japan premium. Without Japan on board, TPP is rather empty.
And next Monday, chief nuclear envoys of South Korea, the United States, and Japan are set to sit down for talks and discussing ways to rein in North Korea's growing threats. Do you think the three sides will be able to forge security cooperation despite the ongoing tussle?
I'd like to be on the positive side, although the entire question is up to how you would define security cooperation among three nations. But as I said, in response to the previous question, there is a very urgent security agendas that all these three nations need to deal with.
Well, in the spirit of nationalism, Japan recently lifted a ban on its arms exports. What do you think will be the next step in the Abe administration's nationalist agenda?
The next step for Abe administration in the same direction would be Japan's right to collective self-defense to be endorsed by other countries.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Bong, for coming in today and for your insight tonight.
My pleasure. Thank you.
If everything goes according to plan, Korea will have a leaner fighting.
Your gateway to the day's biggest stories in Korea and around the world. Breaking news, the hottest interviews, and a whole lot more. Join Arirang's Sean Lim and Yoo Ji-hye from the heart of Seoul. Primetime news, weeknights, live at 10 on Arirang TV.
Next general elections.
In the wake of the recent drone infiltrations by the North, the South Korean military remains on high alert. Arirang News' defense correspondent Kim Hyun-bin has more on the latest findings regarding the North drone technology and how South Korea plans to better protect the country.
South Korean Defense Minister Kim Kwang-jin acknowledged Friday that the military lacks the capability to detect small-sized aircraft like the unmanned area vehicles that were recently found on South Korean soil. The drones, confirmed to be made and developed by North Korea, were not capable of loading explosives. But Kim said that if North Korea were to develop their technology, the regime might be able to load them with explosives or chemical weapons. The defense minister added that North Korea has hundreds of UAVs in its arsenal, and that they are very difficult to detect because they're so small. As such, the South Korean military plans to purchase low-altitude radar systems and other military equipment to prevent an infiltration of Korea's air defense zone. The ministry believes one of the drones, the one found north of Seoul in the city of Paju late last month, malfunctioned and crashed as it was headed back to North Korea. They added that the aircraft had flown at one point over the presidential office for 20 seconds, and a Japanese-made Nikon camera attached to it took around 190 pictures. In a separate development, the ministry says they successfully tested a 500-kilometer ballistic missile on March 23rd. It is capable of hitting any and all strategic targets in North Korea, including key nuclear and military facilities. This missile can hold up to 1 ton of explosives and is expected to be included in South Korea's combat arrangements starting next year. The South Korean military currently has missiles with a range of 300 kilometers that can hold 500 kilograms of explosives in its arsenal. So this successful test represents an upgrade. The ministry says the focus now turns to developing a ballistic missile with a range of 800 kilometers, which can hold up to 500 kilograms of warhead. This will allow the South Korean military to hit any target in the north from anywhere in the country. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
In line with President Park Geun-hye's push to foster Korea's contents industry, which he called the key to future economic growth, a package of measures has been unveiled, from creating a joint investment fund with China to supporting contents-related startups. Our Park Ji-won has more.
Korea's contents industry, which is made up of a diverse set of sub-areas, such as films, music, games, and comics, has grown rapidly over the past few years. Between 2008 and last year, the industry has posted annual average growth of 7.5%. To further induce growth, the Presidential Committee for Cultural Enrichment reported to President Park Friday a total of 48 measures to boost the contents industry.
As the industry has a great ripple effect on the rest of the economy, the government has designated it as a promising service industry. So we plan to support it with a variety of measures.
The measures, which span from financial support to doing away with unfair practices, aim to achieve annual revenue in excess of $110 billion and an annual export volume of some $10 billion by 2017. One of the main initiatives is to raise a government fund of about $47 million. This will be used to invest in small content production companies with an annual revenue of less than $1 million. About 90% of all content-related companies in Korea fall into this category. Korea and China will also raise a joint fund of about $190 million for the co-production of films by both countries. The money comes from the public and private sectors, and the government expects the deal will make it easier for Korean film talents to crack the Chinese market. As the Presidential Committee consists of dozens of key cultural leaders in Korea, including the nation's culture and future ministers, the measures were drawn up through cooperation between related government bodies such as the Culture, Future and Science and Education ministries. The government will also provide office space to creative young people who want to start their own businesses in the industry. It plans to support more than 400 new businesses by 2017. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
Sales of imported cars in Korea hit a record high last month on aggressive promotional campaigns and an introduction of some new models. The Korea Automobile Importers and Distributors Association said Friday that more than 15,000 new foreign-made cars rolled off lots in March. That's up more than 30% from the same period a year earlier. German luxury car brand BMW sold the most cars, followed by Mercedes-Benz and Audi. A U.S. appeals court has thrown out a $920 million verdict against Korean chemical maker Kolon Industries. The Fourth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals in Richmond, Virginia, reversed a 2011 decision that found Kolon responsible for stealing trade secrets for making Kevlar, which is used to make protective gear. The Richmond court said Kolon was wrongfully barred from presenting crucial evidence during the trial. It ordered a new trial with a new judge.
It's time for In the Press, where we look at some of the hot issues of the week that have captured the attention of the domestic media.
From the early arrival of blooming spring to a smart patch that fights Parkinson's disease, our Yu Lian has the details. Lian.
Happy Friday, everyone. We're not just wrapping up the first week of April, but also the first week where many of us here in Korea enjoyed some early signs of spring. Now, the story from 중앙일보 has a headline that reads, Quickly blooming azaleas and cherry blossoms. Flowers are not the guilty ones, but the people. Let's take a quick look at the photos below. You see forsythias, azaleas, and cherry blossoms, all of which, according to the article, bloomed earlier this year by up to 13 days. Now, you also see that swallows and cabbage butterflies were spotted much earlier as well. And the article says this is all possibly due to something called the urban heat island effect here in Seoul. Now, this is where tall buildings absorb and trap heat, causing higher temperatures. It's nice to put the winter cold behind us, but the environmental impact we humans are having on our communities is something we should not forget. Next, moving on to the top news item in this week's papers, the discovery of a crashed North Korean drone that was found to have taken dozens of photos of Seoul, including South Korea's presidential office. Now, these are photos from the front page of the daily Gyeonghang Shinmun, and the one on the left is of the presidential office taken by the North Korean drone. And this right over here is the presidential office. Now, on the right is the same shot taken from Google Earth. Now, so if the North Koreans could have easily gotten the same glimpse of the presidential office through Google Earth, should we be worried about a drone flying over it? Now, that's a debate being had. As reported by Kim Hyun-bin earlier in the newscast, South Korea's defense ministry said the drone was not capable of loading explosives, but some say there's still a cause for concern. For more, let's go on over to this next daily from Ilbo, which covers the same story. And it has a headline right over here that reads, North Korean drone used to verify Google coordinates. So by comparing the coordinates from the photos taken by their drone and the Google Earth images, a military official says North Korea could see whether the exact coordinates match up to find out, for example, the exact location of the president's office in Cheongwade. In that case, it could send a suicide bomber plane to pinpoint and strike a specific target. So the drone itself is not so threatening, but the purpose for which it could be used is. Moving on now, you may be familiar with nicotine patches that help you quit smoking, but what about a patch to fight Parkinson's disease? The headline here from Ilbo reads, the smart patch that diagnoses and treats Parkinson's disease to come out. Now, this adhesive patch, developed by a team of local researchers from Seoul University, can monitor the patient's muscle movements, including tremors related to Parkinson's, in real time and decide whether it requires medication. Now, if it decides it's time, the right dose will automatically be injected via the skin, according to the article. Now, the paper on this latest technology has been published in the prestigious scientific journal, The Nature Nanotechnology. We're now seeing wearable technology quickly venturing into the medical field. I'll leave it at that for this week's look at the stories from the Korean papers.
Let's check on some of the stories making headlines on the global front, from Russia yet again tightening pressure on Ukraine to the ongoing hunt for the missing Malaysian airliner. We go live to our Paul Lee at the News Center.
So, Paul, let's start with Russia's gas hike on Ukraine. Just how much of an increase are we talking about?
An 80% hike. The latest increase is the second in just 3 days, and it represents a huge burden for the Ukrainian economy, which is on the brink of bankruptcy.
Firstly, the price of $468 is absolutely unacceptable. Secondly, the Russian Federation completely understands this. Thirdly, there are no reasons for Russia to increase the gas price to Ukraine from $260 to $460, except one reason.
Ukraine currently meets about half of its total gas needs from Russian supplies, and fears are growing that Moscow might cut off gas deliveries completely. And let's turn to Afghanistan, where presidential elections are set to kick off on Saturday. The vote marks the first democratic transfer of power from one president to another in Afghanistan's history. The election also comes at a critical time, as most foreign troops are preparing to pull out of the country after 13 years of struggling to quell a violent insurgency.
The significant participation of our people in this election will be the biggest guarantee of the continuation of the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan. Strong participation will be the greatest response to those who believe violence and destruction will act as a deterrent against our people.
Security forces are on high alert in the capital, Kabul, on the eve of the election. The Taliban, overthrown in 2001, has warned of attacks at voting centers. The Interior Ministry was hit with a series of suicide bombings on Wednesday, which killed 6 policemen. And moving on to the latest developments in the hunt for the missing Malaysian airliner. The Korea Aerospace Research Institute announced Friday that its multi-purpose satellite, the Arirang 2, may have found debris from the plane in the southern Indian Ocean. Officials say the images were taken on March 26, about 480 kilometers east of the area where a Thai satellite had spotted 122 floating objects off the coast of Australia. The Korean Aerospace Institute said it's using 3 of its high-tech satellites to help find wreckage of the Boeing 777 and is working with other countries on the data. Meanwhile, international search teams have begun using sophisticated underwater equipment to find the black box from the Malaysia airliner. Up to 14 planes and 9 ships were deployed in Friday's search mission. Flight MH370 vanished on March 8th while en route to Beijing from Kuala Lumpur, carrying 239 passengers. That wraps up our look at international stories making headlines around the world. I'll see you back here next week.
Hello and welcome to Primetime Sports. I'm Stephen Che. Now, it's one of the most recognizable and sought-after pieces of sports hardware on the planet. The FIFA World Cup trophy has landed in Seoul for the first of 3 stops in Asia as part of its world tour. It was greeted by South Korea's manager Hong Myung-bo and top football officials in an elaborate ceremony in the capital. Now, fans will be able to view the trophy at Times Square Mall on Saturday and at Seoul's World Cup Stadium on Sunday. The World Cup trophy tour will then head to China and Japan and make one last stop over in the U.S. before returning to Brazil ahead of the tournament. And heading to sunny California, round 1 of the Kraft Nabisco Championship had China's Shanshan Feng take the early lead at 6 under par. And nipping at her heels at 5 under are a resurgent Michelle Wie and South Korean legend Park Se-ri, who can achieve the career Grand Slam with a win. She leads her fellow nationals, 6 of whom are in the top 10. Meanwhile, the world number 1 Park In-bi is currently tied for 46th. And moving on, 2-time world champion figure skater Japan's Miki Ando was honored in a retirement ceremony following an ice show in the city of Nagoya. The 26-year-old said that she was happy with her career and will now focus on the next phase of her life as a skating coach and a mother. Now let's end off today with Friday's top KBO matchup. The Lotte Giants hosted the Samsung Lions in Ulsan. Now Lotte usually plays in Busan, but it's a special event. Now fast forward second inning, Lotte's Park Jong-yoon, he comes home off a double. It's 1-0. Now next inning, more Lotte's Honasop, he triples for 2 scores. Then he comes home himself. It's 4-0 Giants. Now Chris Oxspring, keeps Samsung batters guessing for 6 solid innings of work, and Lotte goes on to win 4-2 for 2 in a row. And looking at the scores from across the league, we have SK trampling Hanwha 13-4, Kia defeating Tusan 6-0, and NC beating Nexon 5-1. And that's all I have for now. This has been Stephen Che. I'll see you back here later for more from the world of sports.
It was a chilly day here in the capital, with daytime highs dropping about 10 degrees compared to earlier this week.
But our Kim Bo-kyung tells us that a cold snap hasn't stopped people from enjoying the 10th Hangang Yeouido Spring Flower Festival. And for more, we connect live to her, who's standing by at Yunjungno. Bo-kyung.
Well, TGIF guys, the plentiful cherry blossoms out here really make it feel as though you're in a fairy tale. However, it's pretty cold. It's currently 7 degrees out here and the wind chills make it feel a couple of degrees colder than that. So if you're headed out for a late night trip, please be sure to dress warmly. The big smile on visitors' faces as they take pictures with their families and friends and bike through the road really makes you forget about the cold snap. Well, the Spring Flower Festival will continue through April 13th here at Yeouiseoru, or better known as Yunjungno. So if you haven't made plans for the weekend already, you should definitely consider coming out. Various cultural events such as character parades or talent shows are planned for visitors to enjoy, and it is highly recommended that you use public transportation as the roads will be closed. As for tomorrow's weather, some parts of the southern and eastern coastal regions may get to see about 5 millimeters of precipitation, and that may be accompanied with storm. Otherwise, tomorrow looks to be another chilly day, but temperatures will jump up to the seasonal average starting Sunday. Taking a look at Saturday's readings, Seoul and Gwangju make it to the low teens, while Daegu and Busan hit the mid-teens. As for other regions, Daejeon and Jeju peak at 12 degrees, while Dokdo and Mount Kumgang top out at 8 and 0. Well, I really hope that you make some time to come on out to enjoy the gorgeous scenery. That's all from me here at the 10th Hangang Yeouido Spring Flower Festival, and back to you guys at the studio.
Absolutely beautiful. Thank you very much, Pogyung. And that's a broadcast on this Friday night. I'm Yuji Hain, Seoul.
And I'm Sean Lim. Thanks for watching. Have a great weekend. We'll see you soon.